Welcome to English Without Limits. Do you like cookies? I hope you do, because in today's lesson we're going to learn how to bake chocolate chip cookies. They're the best kind. I hope you enjoy the lesson. In our last lesson, we learned about how to measure things by weight or volume. If we're measuring something by weight, we would measure it by the kilogram if you want a lot of something, or the gram if you just want a little. For a liquid, we would measure it by volume. If you want a lot of something, you would buy a liter of it, measure it by liters. If you just want a little of something, you measure it by the milliliters. Let's join the class as they begin to review weight and volume.
Good afternoon, boys and girls. How are you today? Good. Good. Do you remember what we were talking about in our last lesson?
Yeah.
Can you tell me what we were talking about?
Volume.
Okay, one at a time. Volume and weight. What units of measurement are we talking about? Elisa?
Kilograms and grams.
Yeah. What else?
Milliliters.
Milliliters? And liters. So what is a loaf? Yes, a loaf of bread. What about a dozen? How do we use a dozen? How do we use a dozen? Eggs, right. Okay. How do we buy milk? In liters, right. What about spices? Milligrams? Grams? Grams. What about food flavoring? How did milliliters, right. What about flour? Flour was a solid. Kilo, right. What about candy? Remember? Kilograms. If you want a lot of candy?
Yeah.
What if you want a little bit of candy? You don't want a little bit of candy? No? But what if I just want one
candy?
One candy. We just say one piece of candy, or maybe a maybe a handful. How do you measure that? Grams, right. Good job.
Let's practice this a little bit now. We will show you different kinds of food or other things on the screen, and you must say if you would measure these by the kilogram, by the gram, by the liter, or the milliliter. Remember, if you want a lot of something and it's a solid, you would say kilogram. If it's a solid and you just want a little bit, you would say grams. If it's a liquid and you want a lot of it, like gasoline, you would say liters. If it's a liquid and you just need a little bit, you would say milliliters. So we will show you different kinds of food or other things on the screen, and I will pause and you must say kilogram or gram, liter or milliliter. I will pause and wait for you to answer, then I will give the correct answer. All right? Are you ready? Let's begin. Rice. How would you measure it? Kilogram. Milk. How would you measure it? By the liter. Candy. How would you ask for candy? You would measure it by the gram. Spices. How would you measure spices? By the gram. Bread. How do we measure bread when we buy it? By the loaf. Food flavoring. How do we measure food flavoring? By the milliliter, very small amount. How do we measure flour when we buy it? By the kilogram, because we want a lot. How do we measure gasoline when we buy it? By the liter. How do we measure sugar when we buy it? By the kilogram or by the gram? How do we measure coffee when we buy it? By the kilogram or the gram? How do we measure cereal when we buy it? By the gram, usually. Do you like to cook? Maybe you do. In many cultures, people do like to cook. In today's class, we're going to do something a little different. The teacher and the students will actually bake some cookies. They will actually get ready to cook some chocolate chip cookies. Now, they won't finish cooking them because that takes some time, but they will do everything else. They will measure all the ingredients and put it together and get ready to bake the cookies. They bake the cookies after the class happens. So I hope you enjoy this. We're going to begin by learning some of the new vocabulary terms that we will use in the lesson.
So today we're going to talk about cooking and baking. Who likes to cook or bake at home? Does anybody? Do you help your parents?
No.
No? Do you?
I don't know.
What do you make with your mom?
Cookies.
Cookies.
Cakes.
Cakes?
Pie.
Pie?
Beer.
Yeah. Does any
Apple pie.
apple pie? That's good. Who has a favorite food they like to make?
Pizza.
Pizza? Elisa?
Cookies. It's a chocolate.
Chocolate cookies? Okay. Anybody have
Ice cream.
ice cream? I remember Lena, you wrote that down for one of your favorite foods one time, ice cream, wasn't it? And pizza? Yeah. Any other favorite foods? What about cookies? How do you make cookies? When you're making it with your mom or your parents?
We get sugar.
You get sugar? Do
Water.
you measure the sugar? How do you measure the sugar?
Like
Do you
in
use
the hand.
or use a measuring cup? You follow.
Or
Yeah.
my mom just look and she
Just
put
looks. Yeah. When we're looking at a recipe, it gives us measurements. Like we say half a cup, so we use half a cup, or a tablespoon of something.
And we have a mini tablespoon.
A tablespoon. Yep. A tablespoon. Remember, a tablespoon's just a little bit. We would say 15 grams equals 1 tablespoon. Remember? Yeah. So, who knows what this is called? Mixer. What about these things that are stuck in it? What are they called? Beaters. They're called the beaters. Yeah. It makes noise. Like, let's try it. What's this called? In English. Anybody know in English what it's called? A spatula. What do you use it for?
To turn over the coconut.
Turn over? Or when you're taking something. Yeah, when you're taking something out,
Yeah.
like cookies. What about this? Everybody know what this is, right? A bowl. What do we use a bowl for?
For put the cookies.
To put the batter in,
Yeah.
mix. Like, what would this be doing? What would I be doing? Mixing or stirring. called?
The hand, you put it in the
Oven mitts.
oven.
Oven mitts. So how do we use them?
We put it in
Something hot.
When you're
you
taking
can
something-
take with your hand.
Right. When you're taking something hot, let's say this was in the oven. Let's say this is in the oven
Hot.
and it's full of cookies. Do I want to touch it with my hands?
No.
I'd want to put
Oven.
oven mitts on to take it out. Right. Okay, we're going to do a little worksheet right now, and then we're going to cook. Okay, so this worksheet, you're going to fill in the sentence. There's a word missing. So it says, you bake a cake in and then on the other sheet there's the words you're going to use. So let's see if you can do it first without using the word list. If you need help, you can use it, okay? I'm going to pass these out.
We're going to do that worksheet in a moment. Before we do, let's just review a few of the new vocabulary words that we're learning in this lesson. The teacher showed you some of them. I'd like to review some of those and add a few more. Let's look at the word ingredients. The word ingredients refers to all the things that go into what you're cooking. It might be flour and sugar, maybe baking soda and butter. All these things are ingredients. They all go in. And then we have recipe. The recipe is like a set of instructions. It tells you what to do. Put in these things, cook it at this temperature. That's what the recipe is. Now when you put all the ingredients together, usually you call that the dough. Before you cook it, it's called the dough for certain kinds of things that you're making. And you would never want to eat just the dough. You always want to cook it first. Where do you cook it? Of course, you cook it on the stove if you're cooking it on the top, or in the oven if you're cooking it inside. When we cook something inside, we often say we're baking it. Of course, the fridge is where you keep your food cold. Not everyone has a fridge in all cultures, but in many cultures they do. When you take your ingredients and put them all together, we say that you are combining. To combine means to put things together. Now let's look at some of the other things that you might have in the kitchen. First of all, you might use a measuring cup. A measuring cup has lines on the side to tell you how much to go in something. This holds about 2 cups or about 500 milliliters. Then sometimes you measure things in small amounts and you would use little measuring spoons. One of these is a teaspoon, one of them is a tablespoon. These are for smaller amounts of things. And then the teacher showed you the spatula. The spatula is what you use to lift things off the pan. And of course, we have a pot. A pot is what you cook things in on top of the stove. Maybe you would cook potatoes or vegetables in your pot. But then sometimes you have a pan. This is a small pan. They're often bigger than this, but a pan is not so deep and it's wider very often. You would cook things like eggs or meat in a pan like this. When you're mixing your ingredients, of course, you put them in a bowl. You put everything in, you combine your ingredients, and then you mix it. If you mix it very hard, we say that you're beating it together. So that's what you do with a bowl. And when you're making cookies, of course, you have to put them on a cookie sheet. A cookie sheet is a flat piece of metal that you use to cook things on. So this is some of the vocabulary that we're going to do in this worksheet. Now, in the worksheet, there are sentences that you need to complete. If you have that worksheet, you can do it now. If you don't, let's do this on the screen together. We will show you the sentence with a blank, and at the bottom we will have a group of words. You must choose the correct word to fill in the blank. All right? Are you ready? Let's begin. You bake a cake in a blank. please pause the video and write down your answer, choosing a word from the list at the bottom. You measure ingredients for a recipe with a blank. Please pause the video and write down your answer. You remove cookies from the cookie sheet with a blank. You cook food in a blank. You keep food cold in a blank. You cook food on the stove in a blank. You stir with a blank. You mix ingredients in a blank. You bake food in the blank. You take hot food out of the oven with blank.
Okay, let's go over that worksheet you just completed. So Dima, would you like to read the first one?
Yes. You bake a cake in a cake pan.
Very good. Elisa, would you like to read number 2?
You measure
Ingredients?
ingredients for a
Recipe?
recipe with a
Measuring?
measuring cup.
Measuring cup. Or you can say measuring spoons. Okay. Number 3, Tanya.
You remove cookies from the cookie sheet with a spatula.
Very good. Lena. Number 4.
You cook food in a oven.
In the oven. Very good. Number 5, Misha.
You keep food cold in a fridge.
Very good. Number 6, Ruslan.
You cook food on the stove in a pot.
In a pot. Very good. Number 7, Vika.
You stir with a spoon.
Very good. Number 8. Who wants to do number? Marta?
You mix
Ingredients?
in a bowl.
Very good. Number
You
9.
bake food in the oven first.
Oven. You bake food in the oven. Very good. Number 10. Would you like to read number 10?
You take hot food out of the oven with oven mitts.
Very good. You guys did a very good job. Okay, let's put your papers underneath your chair or put them away.
Now comes the fun part. The children are going to actually do the baking. They're going to actually get everything ready to cook. So we're going to watch them as they do this. The teacher will have the students help her in this. And as they do each part of the recipe, as they follow the instructions, we will put the words on the screen for what they are doing. You can watch them do it. Now, at the end, you might like to cook some of these yourself. You might like to bake some cookies. So we will give you the recipe on the screen at the end of this lesson. It's also on the disc that should have come with these videos. You can print it off there if you want, but we will give you the recipe at the end of this lesson. Let's join the children